right, still getting a lot of conversation about the Cowboys as usual. Texans and Cowboys both getting high marks for their draft. We've given them high marks for their offseason so far and plugging holes. I do think the Texans are as good as any contender in the AFC. I mean, it's a wide open race. You can pick your horse. I'm a Texans fan, so I'm going to be optimistic that they can get the best out of C.J. Stroud with an improved offensive line and running game, but wide open. NFC, is it wide open? I don't know, but are the Cowboys a contender, Jack? One thing that we have said, and I want to, before we get into that bigger picture conversation, I've talked about this as someone who's done radio in Austin for a long time, covered the Cowboys for, way back to St. Edward's days when they were training camp there. But the Jerry Jones situation, I have observed this whole offseason that something's different with Jerry. Like, he does feel like maybe going to the Super Bowl and seeing Robert Kraft there again with a new coach and a new quarterback, and he still hasn't been back in 30 years. I don't know if that lit something, maybe the 2 years of frustration, but this has been an odd offseason in that Jerry has allowed Brian Schottenheimer to take the reins of this team, in my mind. And this organization, it's a lot of levels. He and Will McClay working together on the offseason, working together on the draft, working together on hiring the new defensive coordinator, Christian Parker. Those are, if you've been following, and you Cowboy fans know this, frustratingly, that Jerry Jones is omnipresent in all this stuff. He tends to do it and hire his own, guys. And the last several defensive coordinators, whether it be Dan Quinn or Matt Eberflus or Mike Zimmer, those were Jerry hires. Not, I don't want to say he didn't consult the coach on it or Mike McCarthy, but Jerry did that. This has been Brian Schottenheimer, and I wanted to play. You can hear me say that, but Trey Wingo, former ESPN guy, now doing his own thing. He interviewed Darren Woodson this week on an interview, and Darren Woodson is someone I respect the heck a lot. I remember when I was at St. Edward's and covering the Cowboys camp, he was this emerging safety out of Arizona State, great player, really level-headed guy. And he was asked, Trey Wingo, you can hear him asking him, you're around the team a lot, do you sense Jerry is different this offseason?
I mean, Will McClay is the general manager. He's just never going to get the title because Jerry doesn't want to give it up. But I mean, when I say he's the general manager, he's not, to use a Jerry term, the decider, or a George W. Bush term, the decider. But he's the guy that basically presents the ideas.
That's right. He puts it on the platter.
Puts up the formula for Jerry to decide on. When you say they're listening, do you believe that Jerry is finally listening and is willing to go along with what people are telling him?
I think so. Look.
You almost answered that way too quickly.
Yeah. Look, I think that it's for the first time that we've seen something different. Every year has been the same model. They don't get involved in free agency. There's nothing, really going on in the offseason. They rely on their guys in-house. They want to sell jerseys like the Micah Parsons and the Diggs. They like the splash players. They love that feel. I think it's the first time this year where they're starting to look at it from a blue-collar standpoint. And it's almost looking at the Seattle Seahawks, the team who was just in the Super Bowl, and watching them build that defense. And they took a key part, a guy who was formidable against Micah Parsons, who was arguing with Micah Parsons last year about showing up, not doing the podcast, and DeMarcus Lawrence. Like, he was the guy who kept on saying, we need to stick to football, and they got rid of him. And now they're watching him flourish in Seattle. But that's the type of, I think that's what they're trying to get to is, they would love to have the superstars, but make the superstars buy into the program.
All right, there you go. Darren Woodson. Is Jerry listening? I think that is a fascinating conversation. And it feels like he is. Is it more blue collar as well? And again, if you're going to give it to Brian Schottenheimer, Will McClay, and Christian Parker to kind of run this thing, that's finally a really, really good move, in my opinion. Finally. And we'll see. It does feel, I'm not trying to get Cowboys fans over optimistic, and I don't think Darren Woodson is. We're just observing it, and it looks like Jerry's actually listening to his people, and look at Brian Schottenheimer, brings a lot of experience. He was kind of snickered at when he got the head coaching job, but he showed that he's up to the job last year, and did a very, very good job. The next question, guys, and Jack, is going to be George Pickens and what they do with George Pickens, right? I mean, that's going to be the conversation, and he has not signed the franchise tender. This is the next big challenge. How this plays out for the Cowboys because they've had a really good offseason, in my opinion, after having back-to-back dreadful off seasons and gone into the summer with contract negotiation stalemates with CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott 2 years ago. This past year, it was Micah Parsons, and that dragged all the way through training camp and the summer until he was traded to the Packers. You don't want to do that again with George Pickens. You don't want to do that again. And he has not signed the franchise tender. I'll play this. This is Trey Wingo again with Darren Woodson talking about the George Pickens situation. That has not been signed yet. And so we got the report from Adam Schefter last Thursday that George Pickens, I think we all kind of read it as, okay, he's signed his franchise tender. He's good. I thought that meant the Cowboys might trade him during the draft weekend. They did not. And now it's being reported that he hasn't yet signed it. The Adam Schefter report was he will sign it. And maybe he will. Maybe that will happen. Maybe he's been on a trip somewhere. Maybe he's been vacationing and he's going to come back and do it. But Darren Woodson had some thoughts about what the Cowboys should do if he doesn't sign that contract, that tender.
Going to be under that contract, even though he hasn't signed it. Todd Archer just tweeted out that George Pickens has not yet signed the franchise tag tender with the Cowboys, and there's still time to do that. Adam seems to believe that because of the situation, George Pickens is now more tradable at this point than Micah Parsons was at this point this year. Last year? What do you make of that?
Look, I'm torn on this because I saw Pickens and been around him enough to see that there was a change that took place. Like we watched Pickens in Pittsburgh from afar and thought
took some time off.
He took some time off, and it was half crazy. I would just say kind of half crazy within the locker room. Didn't play hard all the time, and he's always had this persona more on the negative side of who he was in Pittsburgh. Well, he came over to Dallas last year. And you ask, if you ever want to know the truth about a player, just ask the equipment guys and ask the trainers. They'll tell you what kind of guy he is. No one had a problem with him. Not one person in that locker room said he showed up every day. He was always on time. You didn't hear it. He was never a headache. He did everything the right way until maybe the Detroit game where,
there it is.
He didn't, okay. But anyway, other than that, he did everything the right way. Would I love to have George Pickens on this team? Absolutely, because you got two number ones. But the reality is you're trying to build a team, Trey. You're trying to build a team for the long run. And I don't know. I can't remember the last time I saw two number ones in the Super Bowl championship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like two number one wide receivers, and you're in the dance party. I don't remember seeing that. Like, I think there's a part of this where you have to figure out a way to allocate some of those funds, and especially if you can trade and get something in return for Pickens. That's the way I look at it. I just think that they're starting to understand now more than anything. And I thought it started with the hire of Christian Parker. They're building this a little differently than what they had in the past.
All right, so there's Darren Woodson, and once again, he should be in the Hall of Fame, by the way. Can I just say that? Darren Woodson should be in the Hall of Fame, having watched his entire career. Converted safety from Arizona State, or linebacker at Arizona. He's just a great player. He was kind of ahead of his time. He's kind of a Caleb Downs type player before that. Didn't play that style of football, but love me some Darren Woodson. And that was, I think he's spot on. And look, Jack, if he'll sign it and play for $27.5 million this year and be a good teammate and want to go try to win a Super Bowl with kind of the agreement that we'll let you be a free agent next offseason, I'm okay with that, and would cap off a really strong couple of months and an offseason for Jerry and the Cowboys and Will McClay. But if he's going to be, that problem, let's orchestrate a deal. Let's get something. Hey, call Vegas and revisit the Max Crosby trade.
Sure.
Bill, you drafted a young guy in Malachi Lawrence. Revisit the Max Crosby thing if he checks out medically. Go get yourself another piece, because the long haul would tell you you're not keeping George Pickens beyond this year. If he's going to be a problem all summer long, your head coach, your coaching staff, they don't need that all summer long again. It's just a headache they don't need. If you're going to be a contender in the NFC, which with the Rams, the Seahawks, the Packers, the Eagles in your own division, Detroit's going to be back, I think. Very talented teams. You need as few distractions, just like they just said about Seattle and all about ball. It's got to be all about ball. It can't be about George Pickens or an individual player. They've got to deal with that now. Don't let that drag into the summertime.
No, because I think it's pretty clear they're not going to extend him. I just don't think they can.
Steven said it. We're done talking long term.
So it's either it's one of two things. Either he's going to sign it or you trade him. I really think that has to be what it is. And it has to be that George Pickens is not with the team. Like, you basically have to announce he's not on your team. Because what can you do? If he doesn't sign the tag, what can you do?
I know. Well, but I think if
But
you
he
were,
will if you trade him.
But if you started talking about landing spots,
right?
You get David Mulligetta, his agent, involved. They will find a place, but you got to get a piece. You got to get a body.
Because I don't
just
think
a body. You can get a really good current player to add to your defense, which still is not solved. Caleb Downs, Malachi Lawrence, all the draft picks. The moves you made, they're still available. Still could use a corner. You could use Max Crosby off the edge. There's a lot of things you could use. Use the chip to be a contender this year, knowing George Pickens is, if he's going to be a problem this summer and not long term, you take advantage of it now.
Because announcing that he is basically not a Dallas Cowboy and he's a trade chip, that doesn't kill your leverage for a player like George Pickens.
No.
The price will get driven up for somebody that good. It's not like, Rashawn Gary, who you traded for, even though he was going to get released. George Pickens isn't getting released.
Well, look, the Patriots are about to trade for A.J. Brown.
Right.
Well, and they're about to give up maybe a first-round pick to get him.
Whoever misses on A.J. Brown will be thinking we need a receiver.
Well,
George Pickens might be better than A.J. Brown.
Call the Patriots and say, hey, I know, Vrabel, you know A.J. Brown, but would you rather have George Pickens? But if much like they did with the Micah thing and Kenny Clark, you can identify a veteran that you want, a piece that would really help your defense right now, like a corner or like a pass rusher, which, those are hard to find. But I would call the Raiders about the Max Crosby thing and see if that is because we know the Ravens and all the sketchiness of why they pulled out of that deal and the knee. But Max Crosby would look pretty nice wearing the star on his helmet this year. On that defense might be the final piece to really getting that thing where it needs to be a contender, because that's your goal. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you're going to the Super Bowl, but you got to get that defense fixed. And if Pickens is not long-term, use the chip now. I agree with Darren Woodson 100% right there.